Someone planned this for months, not in a rage, not in a moment of desperation, with a spreadsheet, with a timeline, with a fake profile on a fetish website. On February 24th, 2023, 2 people died inside a house in Herndon, Virginia. One of them was lured there on purpose. The other never knew what was coming. And the man who planned it all was a federal law enforcement agent, someone trained to investigate exactly this kind of crime. This is the Herndon double homicide. And the longer you look at it, the colder it gets. Brendan Banfield was 40 years old, a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. He knew how homicide investigations worked. He knew what evidence looked like. He knew what mistakes killers made. His wife, Christine, was 37, a pediatric intensive care nurse. They had a 4-year-old child together. And since August 2022, Brendan had been having an affair with the family's au pair, a 25-year-old Brazilian woman named Juliana Peres Magalhães, who lived in their home. He didn't want a divorce, not because he loved his wife, because divorce cost money, alimony, custody battles, the house. A former mistress later testified in court that Brendan told her, "During their affair, and I want you to sit with this exact phrasing, it would be so much easier for us if she was not around." He wasn't talking about separation. What followed was not a crime of passion. It was a project. The plan required a stranger, someone who had no connection to the Banfields, someone who could be placed at the scene and blamed for everything. To find that person, Brendan and Juliana created a fake profile on FetLife, a fetish-oriented social platform. The profile was called Anastasia9. The photos were of Christine. The interests listed were not Christine's. They found a man named Joseph Ryan, 39 years old, a resident of Washington, D.C., active in the LARP and BDSM communities. His handle was Taco Supreme 7000. Through encrypted Telegram messages, the fake Anastasia9 profile told Joseph that she wanted to act out a stranger rape fantasy. She told him to arrive at the house, bring a knife, bring restraints, and if he heard screaming, that was part of the role play. Ignore it. Joseph Ryan believed he had consensual permission from a husband who knew about the encounter. He had no idea he was being choreographed into a murder scene. They prepared carefully. December 23rd, 2022. Brendan and Juliana visited a shooting range, together the Silver Eagle group, to practice. January 28th, 2023. Brendan returned alone and purchased a Glock pistol for $558. This was not his service weapon. This was the execution weapon. 4 days before the murders, both of them exchanged their mobile phones for new units. A clean slate, new devices, new logs, no location history from the months of planning. The morning of February 24th, Brendan disabled the front door lock before he left the house so that when Joseph Ryan arrived, there would be no sign of forced entry. The door would just open. Here is what the reconstruction shows, minute by minute. 7 a.m., Brendan leaves the house. Juliana leaves shortly after, taking the child. Before he goes, Brendan turns off Christine's phone so she cannot call anyone. 7:15 to 7:40. Brendan establishes himself at a nearby McDonald's. Surveillance cameras record him there. This is his alibi. Juliana parks in the cul-de-sac. She is the lookout. 7:45. Joseph Ryan arrives. He enters through the unlocked front door. Juliana calls Brendan. 7:47. A 911 call is placed by Juliana. It lasts 8 seconds before she ends it. In the background of that call, investigators later identified sounds described as human groans, a wounded person. Already 7:50 to 8 o'clock. Brendan and Juliana enter the house. They put the child in the basement. They go upstairs to the master bedroom. 8 a.m. Brendan shoots Joseph Ryan in the head with his IRS service weapon. While Ryan is incapacitated on the floor, Juliana retrieves the Glock from a bathroom safe. She fires a second shot into his chest. 8:01. Brendan stabs Christine 7 times in the neck with the kitchen knife that Joseph Ryan had brought to the house. 8:02. Brendan calls 911. He identifies himself as a federal agent. He says he came home, found an intruder, shot him in self-defense, and that the intruder had stabbed his wife. The narrative was set. A home invasion, a husband who fought back, a tragedy, except the blood didn't cooperate. Forensic analyst Iris Daly-Graff examined the bloodstain patterns in that master bedroom. What she found was not consistent with a home invasion. It was consistent with staging. Joseph Ryan's hands had wet, ribbon-like bloodstains smeared across them in multiple directions. That kind of pattern doesn't happen during a struggle. It happens when someone takes an incapacitated body, and physically moves the hands through a blood source after the fact to make it look like he did something he didn't do.
Bloodstain evidence on Brendan Banfield's jeans showed linear cast-off patterns consistent with someone swinging a knife, contradicting his claim that he arrived only after the attack. His testimony that Christine spoke and apologized after being stabbed was also disproven by medical evidence. Her neck wounds made speech biologically impossible. Her lifelong blood clotting disorder further undermined the defense theory that she willingly participated in a violent fetish encounter. The digital evidence remained disputed. Defense experts argued that activity on the FetLife account suggested Christine was its user, while prosecutors focused on motive and behavior, noting that Brendan, not Christine, had a documented history of interest in such material. The investigation itself faced internal tensions, with disagreements among detectives and forensic personnel over evidence interpretation, highlighting how institutional pressure can influence major cases. The case ultimately turned when Juliana accepted a plea deal and testified that Brendan had designed the murder plot to avoid the financial consequences of divorce and replace Christine with her. In February 2026, Brendan was convicted on all counts, including 2 counts of aggravated murder, and sentenced to life without parole plus 8 years. Juliana pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received the maximum 10-year sentence. Victim impact statements revealed the lasting devastation caused by the crime. Joseph Ryan's mother described her son as a pawn in someone else's plan, while Christine's family said the fabricated fetish narrative was nearly as painful as her murder. One haunting detail came from the day of the killings, when the 4-year-old child reportedly asked Juliana, "Can I call you mommy now?" Today, the case is studied as a lesson in the limits of premeditation. Despite careful planning, the perpetrators could not overcome bloodstained science, medical evidence, or the eventual testimony of a co-conspirator. The deception collapsed because physical evidence remained unchanged. Blood patterns, wounds, and even a child's words ultimately pointed to the truth.